Welcome to ClubhouseNews.com. You're tuned in to Clubhouse News Weekend for the week ending Saturday, July 25th. I'm Erin.
And I'm Joshua. The USA and Cuban relations and embassies officially reopened this month. On July 20th, the American Embassy in Havana, Cuba, and the Cuban Embassy in Washington, D.C. reopened for the first time in more than 50 years. This marks the official reopening of diplomatic relations between the United States and Cuba, a Spanish-speaking island nation of 11 million people only 90 miles off the coast of Florida. Next month, top American diplomat John Kerry will become the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit Cuba in 70 years, all made possible because President Obama and Cuban President Raul Castro, who took over from his brother Fidel in 2006, agreed last month to finally restore relations between the two countries, which have been virtually non-existent since the revolution of 1959, where Fidel Castro, Raul's brother, overthrew the government and became an all-powerful communist dictator. In 1960, the USA placed economic restrictions on Cuba called an embargo, limiting their ability to trade and make money. At the time, the USA and Soviet Russia were involved in a Cold War that lasted from 1947 to 1991, and Castro took the Russian side. He allowed the Soviets to place nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the USA. This triggered a 13-day standoff called the Cuban Missile Crisis that almost started World War III. At last month's Summit of the Americas, President Obama reassured leaders of Central America, South America, and the Caribbean that the USA would help countries be prosperous, so long as they respect the human rights of their citizens and didn't threaten America. Obama even shook hands with the Cuban president.
A historic deal limits Iran's nuclear program. The United Nations Security Council this past Monday unanimously approved, by a vote of 15-0, a 104-page-long resolution that limits Iran's nuclear capabilities in exchange for ending the international economic sanctions against the Middle East nation, which has pledged to let in international monitors to inspect its nuclear facilities for the next 10 years to guarantee that its nuclear energy activities are purely peaceful. Since 1979, the USA and its allies have been concerned that Iran was developing nuclear power to make weapons, rather than just to create energy like electricity and heat. For decades, the leaders of the two nations didn't talk to one another, and the USA coordinated international trade restrictions on Iran, which crippled their economy financially. With the United Nations vote out of the way, it's now up to the U.S. Congress, which has to vote on this resolution separately. And that vote is anything but a sure thing, since Israel, the USA's top ally or friend in the Middle East, is strongly opposed to the deal.
The Americans with Disabilities Act turns 25 this year. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, which was signed into law in 1990 by then-President George H.W. Bush, legally protects citizens from discrimination based on disability and ensures fair treatment for people with mental and physical medical conditions of all kinds. The law requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations to employees with disabilities, things like special handicap bathrooms, and also removes barriers for people with disabilities in public transportation, buildings, and telecommunications, requiring all of them to be more accessible for the disabled or handicapped. That means everything from wheelchair ramps to listening devices and closed captioning for the hearing impaired, to Braille for the blind, and handicapped parking spaces and seats in movie theaters. The 25th anniversary of this landmark law was celebrated all across the country this week, and President Obama gave a speech praising the importance of the ADA. And what a better way to celebrate the ADA than to kick off the 2015 Special Olympic World Games in Los Angeles. From July 25th to August 2nd, some 7,000 athletes with disabilities from 177 countries will be competing in 27 sports. Now that's truly inspiring. Way to go, Special Olympic athletes!